Hello, my name is Charlene. I'm 18 years old. I'm Ivorian and Congolese, and this is my story. From a very young age, I lived with my mother and was separated from my father. They split up even before I was born, so I hardly ever saw my dad. My mother didn't want me to see him, and because of that, I spent my life this way, maybe meeting him once every 2 years, or even going 5 years without seeing him. My entire childhood was spent by my mother's side. It was a difficult childhood because, from a very early age, I was mistreated by my mother, both physically and psychologically. She would hit me with her bare hands or whatever was within her reach. Shoes, chargers, any object. I didn't understand why I was getting beaten, but I kept silent and endured it. We moved many times, really many times. And what surprised me was that our neighbors knew what was happening at home, but no one had the courage to do anything for me. I always hoped that someone would have the courage to speak up for me, but it never happened, except for one time when I was about 9 years old. We lived in Drancy, on the first floor, and the neighbors on the ground floor called a hotline to report abuse. We scheduled a meeting, and before we even went, my mother already knew the reason. She told me, "My daughter, you wouldn't want to see your mother in prison, so don't tell them what happens at home." And despite everything that was happening, I still loved my mother. So I decided to keep quiet. At that meeting, no one asked me what was going on. They only spoke with my mother. She said whatever she wanted, and nothing changed. I have 2 brothers, and with one of them, my younger brother, there was a certain rivalry. We are 8 years apart, and he was the darling of the house, the youngest, so he had more privileges. There was a lot of competition between us, especially between me and him. My mother always compared us, even when it wasn't necessary, which hurt me deeply. Besides that, I faced difficulties at school, where I also suffered. I didn't like to admit it, but I was constantly bullied and didn't understand why they didn't like me. I was always alone, isolated, and that hurt me deeply. I hoped for some support from my family, but even at home, things were very tough. Additionally, I have sickle cell anemia, which means I need frequent medical follow-ups at the hospital to monitor my condition. Because of this disease, my mother was supposed to take care of me since I'm more fragile due to my condition. But even knowing that I had this illness, my mother continued to hit me. I learned not to tell people close to me that I was sick, because, since I lived only with my mother, whenever I got sick, she was the one who had to be called. She had to leave work to pick me up and take me to the emergency room, because when I get sick, it's an emergency case. I felt like this bothered her. And even when I was very sick, really very sick, my mother would get angry with me, to the point of almost hitting me. When I was in middle school, I started having thoughts about ending my own life. Things were really difficult. I took medications for sickle cell anemia, which were quite strong, and also the pills they gave me during crises, which were very potent. I hoped it would be like in the movies, where you take the medications, start foaming at the mouth, and just like that, end your life peacefully. I just wanted to leave in peace because life wasn't working out anymore. I tried everything. I used to cut myself and constantly thought about the people close to me who took their own lives. I would think, why not me? Why not me? Those people left in peace. They were people who couldn't take it anymore because things weren't okay, because they were bullied and had no support. So, why should I endure all this? What am I going through at home? When I was in middle school, we lived on the 5th floor, and there was this kind of ledge that didn't serve any purpose. Sometimes I would climb up on it and just stand there staring into the void. I'd stand on that stone and look into the emptiness thinking, "Charlene, jump, Charlene, jump. Go ahead, you don't have your family's support. Your family mistreats you. Your so-called friends don't like you either. At school they hurt you. Nobody's there for you. Jump, it's all you have left. Go ahead, jump." But I never had the courage to actually jump, even though these thoughts were always in my head, constantly. Sometimes when I was being beaten, I would cry to my mom, saying, "I'm going to end it all, you'll see." And her response was, "Go ahead, do it, go ahead." When I was 12 or 13, we went to Ivory Coast, like we did every year. One night, I don't know why, but there was no one home. Not my stepfather, not my brothers. I was alone in the house with my mom. I was in my room, sleeping, Suddenly, my mom wakes me up and says, "Don't move." She had something in her hand, and it was pepper. She said, "Don't scream, or I'll do worse." And then she rubbed the pepper all over my body, on my face, in my private parts. I was 12 or 13 years old. I screamed, but she put a pillow over my head and said, "If you scream, I'll leave you like this." At some point, she decided to leave me alone, but it was a traumatic experience. At one point, my mom said she was going to leave me alone, so she let me go and told me I could go to the shower. As I left my room, there was a staircase right there, and next to it, the bathroom door. The space was really narrow. Once my younger brother slipped on those stairs and split his forehead open. It was something quite serious. When my mom let me go, I still had pepper on my head. I could barely see, and all I wanted was to wash it off my body. Even so, she let me go, knowing that I could easily fall down those stairs. I don't know what could have happened, but I managed to make it to the bathroom and wash all that pepper off. It was really hard. The sensation of the pepper kept burning my body. It was unbearable. After that episode, I didn't want to talk to my mom anymore. But since I was young, she always manipulated me. She would hurt me and then give me a gift, trying to show that she loved me, only to go back to being cruel afterward. It was always like that. I really felt abandoned. It's important to mention that my dad is Christian, and my mom was Muslim. So I attended the mosque, but I always felt alone, like I was constantly abandoned. When the pandemic hit, my mom, who worked in a restaurant as a bartender, started staying home more since the restaurants were closing. This was what I feared the most, because whenever we stayed in the same house, things didn't go well. Before every presidential announcement, I prayed that he wouldn't close the restaurants, because I didn't want to be alone with my mom. I even felt happy when the restaurants stayed open, and she could go to work, so we wouldn't have to be alone in the house. But, over time, the restaurants closed, and my mom started staying home more. It was horrible. I was beaten all the time, for no reason at all, as if she did it for pleasure. I was treated like a soccer ball, kicked and punched. Every night, I wore several layers of clothing to try to ease the pain from the blows. Our family was very dysfunctional, and my mom prevented us from having contact with other relatives. I thought she did this because she knew she was wrong, and didn't want anyone to know how we lived, what things were like in our house. To try to cope with all of this, and avoid doing something irreversible, I started writing in a diary. I found a notebook, and used it to vent about everything that happened at home. I didn't hold back. If I needed to call her a witch, or say I didn't love her, I wrote it down. I put on paper everything I felt, both about my mom and my younger brother. The harsh words they said, the beatings I endured, everything was there. One day, my older brother, who's 2 years younger than me, found my diary. He took that notebook and handed it to my mom out of pure malice. When he came into the living room, where I was, he smiled, and I didn't understand why. Shortly after, my mom appeared, visibly very angry, and said that my brother was going to turn my room upside down, and that I should stay where I was, without moving. At that moment, I got scared. I thought she was going to find my cell phone, and I had completely forgotten about the notebook. I usually hid it among other notebooks, so I wasn't worried about her finding it. My biggest fear was that she'd discover the phone, but even if she did, it wouldn't be too serious because it had happened before. I thought about leaving the house, but my mom had the habit of locking us in, and we didn't have the key to get out. I was trapped. Then, she came back to tell me that she had found both the notebook and the cell phone. I was shocked, thinking, how did she find it? My mom used to go through my closet and my clothes, but never through my notebooks. That's when I realized that my brother had really gone through everything to give that notebook to her. My mom said she was going to spend the whole night reading the notebook. I went to my room and put on several layers of clothing, because I knew what I had written in that notebook could be my downfall. I didn't know how she would react. If she had only found the cell phone, I probably would have gotten a few slaps, but the notebook, I had no idea what could happen. That night, I couldn't sleep. This happened right after my birthday, on June 4th. The next day, my mom left for work and said, "When I get back, you'll see." She left, and the day went by. She didn't call me, and I stayed in my room the whole time. One morning, she told me to go with her to work. She used to take me to work with her, either cleaning or in the salon, so I was used to it. I didn't want to go, but I put on my clothes and went. When I got there, I realized that if I didn't do something on my own that day, I wouldn't be able to handle whatever she might do to me afterward. In the car, on the way to work, she threatened and insulted me, saying horrible things like, "You're worthless. You'll see what I'm going to do to you tonight. Remember what I did when you were little? The pepper will happen again today." I thought I could handle being beaten, but when she mentioned what she had done to me when I was a child, that was too much for me. I couldn't bear the thought of going through that again. I was 16 years old and knew I couldn't go through that again. We arrived at her work, and at some point, I stayed with the receptionist. That's when I tried to remember my dad's company email, with whom I hadn't been in contact for years. I found the address and sent him a message. "Dad, if you don't reply by this time, I'm going to disappear. It doesn't matter where, but I'm leaving because I can't take what Mom is doing to me anymore." He didn't respond. I copied and pasted the message, sent it again, several times, more than 100 times, and nothing. I was desperate. Only 5 minutes left until the time I had decided to leave. I kept sending the messages, but he didn't respond. And then, finally, I got a notification. It was a reply from my dad. "My daughter, you can't do this like that. There are laws and everything. Be patient, things will get better. We'll do everything the right way." I replied, "Dad, this has been happening for years. I can't take it anymore. It's too much. Either you come get me or I'll come to you, but I can't stay here any longer. I need to leave." So he gave me his number, which I hid in my shoe. After getting the number, I waited for my mom to move to a corner where she couldn't see me. When I had the chance, I ran. We were at her work, and I ran. I passed by a security guard and tried to act normal, because if he noticed something was wrong, he would take me back to my mom. So I stayed calm, talked to him like everything was fine, and as soon as he turned his back, I ran again. Instead of taking the subway, I started crying. I cried a lot because running away from home isn't something common in my family. I had never done it before, never left like that. I was in tears when a man asked me if I was okay. I said yes, but asked if I could use his phone to call my dad. He lent me the phone, and I called my dad. He wanted to come get me, but I told him I could go on my own, that he was probably working, and I would find a way to get to him. It was lucky that I called because, even though I knew where he lived, I never had the courage to go there since my mom always knew how to keep me trapped. Besides, my dad had moved with my stepmom, so it was good that I reached out to him. I managed to make my way to him, and my dad came to pick me up. Finally, I was with him and my stepmom. This was on June 6th. My dad told me that we would resolve everything the right way, that we needed to go to the police station because I had run away, and my mom had taken away his parental rights. So, we needed to clear that up. We went there, and I explained my situation. At first, no one seemed to understand or want to listen. They said that since my mom had parental authority, she was in charge. But my dad and I explained that I had suffered physical and psychological abuse for years. After much persistence, they finally agreed to file my report and allowed me to stay with my dad until the trial. So I started living with my dad and stepmom. It's important to mention that, before running away, when I was on the computer sending messages to my dad asking him to come get me, I logged into the Apple ID to erase everything on my phone. But since I left suddenly, I only had time to erase the password. My mom ended up getting access to my phone, and I had taken some photos meant only for myself. When I left home, instead of handling the situation appropriately, my mom decided to try to destroy me. She sent those photos to members of our family, saying that I was a rebellious and lost girl, as they say in our culture, implying that I was into fornication and things like that. She used this as a justification for the few instances of abuse she admitted to. In other words, she completely denied all the years of mistreatment. My mom also sent those photos to strangers and even gave out my dad's contact information, including his phone number, so people could call him and say he had manipulated my mind, and so on. This really destroyed me. It hurt me deeply. It was devastating to realize that my own mother was sending out my photos, pictures that I had never sent to anyone and had kept for myself, because at that time, I felt unloved. I wanted to prove to myself that I was beautiful. So, I took those photos just for me, with no intention of sharing them, and my mom used that against me. We took the case to the judge and the lawyers, and everyone believed the image my mom had painted of me, but it wasn't true at all. I was shattered. No one believed me. I could feel the doubt in people when they talked to me. Family members would send me messages saying, "Oh, you're a bad person. You couldn't handle the beatings your mom gave you, and she did it for your own good." I had to endure all of this. Because of my illness, I had appointments in Paris at the Robert Debré Hospital, so my mom needed to be present since she had my ID, health card, and other documents. And at every appointment, which happened more than twice a month, she would insult my dad in every possible way and call me every name under the sun. Until one day, I couldn't take it anymore. I had never really responded to my mom from the heart, but that day, I told her the whole truth. She was speechless, and my dad could feel that I was speaking the truth. My mom couldn't respond. That day, I felt a bit more at peace. After that, I lost contact with my mom because I no longer needed to go to appointments in Paris. So, I arranged for all my treatments to be done where I lived, with my brother. To this day, my mom still refuses to give me my identification documents. I almost couldn't take the college entrance exam, but I managed to pass. So, I didn't see her again, or get in touch with her. One day, when I went to visit my dad, I met a woman who handed me a flyer, an invitation to go to church. I talked to my dad about it, but he, respecting my religion and the fact that I'm Muslim, told me I could do whatever I wanted. So one day, I decided to go to church. When I walked in, I saw people kneeling, crying, and at first I thought it was strange. But by the end of the service, I found myself crying too. After those tears, I felt an immense peace and love that I had never experienced before. I kept attending the services, and the more I went, the better I felt. Every time I went, I felt lighter, more at peace. My life was going really well. I hadn't abandoned my religion, but I was progressing in my life, where before, I thought I wasn't capable of doing anything, that I had no value. I discovered that I had value in the eyes of God. Today, we're waiting for our year-end results, because I've just completed my first year of law school, so I'm a law student. If someone had told me this a few years ago, I wouldn't have believed that I could finish a year in law school. I had my experience with Jesus Christ. I was baptized on May 6th, 2023, and I'm happy to be with Jesus Christ. He grants me everything I desire. I pray, and He answers me. He gives me what I want. I founded a dance association in my city, and He allowed me to achieve that. I fight every day, and He comes to support my struggles. What I ask for comes true. I know I have big plans to fulfill. I know I have a great battle to face. But I also know that God is by my side, that Jesus Christ is by my side. Today, I'm happy to have this relationship with Christ, and every day I try to fight by evangelizing so that others can know this love, because I get what I desire. And I know people have certain needs, and I know it's through Jesus Christ that they can be met. Currently, I live my relationship with God fully. Recently, I sent a message to my mom, asking for forgiveness. It was God who gave me the strength to do this recently, and I did it. I was waiting for her response, but she clearly denied the facts. The manipulation is still there, but I know that God will act. I have faith that He can bless each of you, no matter the difficulties you're going through. I know that God is faithful. Put your trust in Him, and He will do great things with you. May God bless you. What a powerful and inspiring testimony. This story is a true testament to the transformative power of God, who can change even the toughest situations and bring light where there was once darkness. And now I ask you, who are watching? What have you done to allow God to transform your life? Have you allowed yourself to give your pains and challenges to Him, just as Charlene did? Reflect. What are the areas in your life that need to be surrendered to God today? Is it time for you to take a step of faith and trust in His plan for your life? Don't wait any longer. Change begins with the decision. Let God work in your life as He did in Charlene's life. Start today, right now, seeking that transformation. And to continue learning about how God can work in your life, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Together, we can grow in faith and find the purpose that God has for each of us. May God bless you and your journey of faith.
was feeding me, something terrible happened. My body convulsed, my eyes rolled back, and I fell to the ground paralyzed and cold, appearing to be dead. The healers in the area, after examining my body, declared me dead. One of my aunts felt compelled to check my heart and noticed a faint heartbeat. Immediately, she informed my mother, who, filled with hope, began to gather money to take me to the best doctor. But after 7 years, my body was completely dried out. My legs were deformed, withered, and twisted. I remember when the hospitals and doctors began to close their doors to us, telling my mother that medical science could do nothing, that my disease was incurable, that it had destroyed my nerves and muscles, and that my body was dead. Medicine could do no more. I would soon die. All that day, my mother kept begging for the miracle, and when night came, she was still pleading. The next morning, her eyes were swollen, and her throat was sore from so much pleading, but the miracle didn't come. Today marks 10 years since you became paralyzed. In these 10 years, I have suffered a lot, son. I have suffered so much with you, son, and I can't bear to keep seeing the condition you're in. I would rather you die. I know it will hurt to know that you're going to die, but once you do, my eyes won't see it anymore, and I won't suffer anymore. In time, everything fades, son. I saw a deep abyss opening, a darkness moving, and I began to ascend downward. I knew I had died, but I didn't know where I was going. I wanted to scream for my father, but I couldn't. Suddenly, I saw a light penetrating that darkness, a light that enveloped my body, and I was caught up in it. I found myself standing before a massive white throne, and a thundering voice shook the place, saying, "I am Jesus of Nazareth, the chosen one. Though you don't know me, I know you, for I have set my eyes on you. Satan knew that I had chosen you, so he destroyed you, but I defeated Satan on the cross of Calvary. I give you life. For those I hold in my hands, I give life."
If you felt moved by this testimony and want to watch this story and more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Here, we share powerful experiences that can transform lives and strengthen faith. Click the subscribe button, activate the notification bell to receive updates, and join our community of faith and hope.